Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're looking at God is Spirit, Quantum Physics, and God. This is science simplified, you know? We're going to explore this absolutely fascinating intersection between ancient spirituality and modern physics, and we'll see how they might actually be talking about the exact same reality. So it raises a really simple yet deeply profound question. When you hear the word God, or if you just try to imagine what God looks like, what do you actually see in your mind's eye? Do you see an old man in a white robe? Maybe a universal glowing energy field? Or is there just nothing at all?
But here's the real challenge, right? The central impossibility we have to face is this. How can an infinite being, a completely limitless entity like God, even take on the substance of a thought on our minds, let alone a physical shape? I mean, does God even have a form, a literal brain where thoughts are firing? How do we even begin to visualize the infinite? Well, to answer that, let's jump right into Section 1, the mystery of spirit.
Think back for a second to the ancient Israelites building the tabernacle. They were strictly forbidden from crafting any image of God from wood or stone. And why is that? Because you simply cannot reduce a limitless, infinite entity into a three-dimensional object without completely diminishing what it actually is. But obviously, humans still need a way to interact with the divine, right? The problem is, seeing God in his absolute fullness would physically destroy us. Our human minds just couldn't process that level of information. It'd be exactly like the bad guys in that Indiana Jones movie. You know, the one where their minds quite literally overloaded and exploded looking at the aliens? So to let us interact safely, God uses what we call theophanies. Basically, these are physical, tangible manifestations of his presence. Think of the miniature sun, or that glowing orb of light or fire that would manifest over the Ark of the Covenant. It's God appearing in our physical realm without trying to cram his entire infinite essence into a finite contained form. And that brings us to Section 2, matter versus spirit. Now, traditionally, theology likes to build this massive wall, keeping matter and spirit completely separate. But looking at the source texts, there's this fascinating tension. Take Luke chapter 24, for example. Jesus appears inside a locked room, proving he isn't a ghost by literally having his terrified disciples touch his physical flesh and bone. And this brilliantly illustrates the paradox because he just materialized inside a locked room. It completely blurs the lines between what is spirit and what is physical matter. So what exactly is this spiritual essence? Well, when Jesus is speaking to the woman at the well in John chapter 4, the original Greek text reads pneuma ho theos, and this emphasizes that God's very essence is spirit. It means he's simple, uncompounded, and definitely not made of the earth elements you'd find on our periodic table. But, and we have to be incredibly careful here, saying God is immaterial absolutely does not mean he is nothing. Actually, scratch that. It's the exact opposite. God is the opposite of nothing. He is literally everything. Which leads us right into Section 3, the illusion of solidity. Okay, look at this staggeringly small number for a second, 10 to the minus 8 centimeters. That is the size of a single atom. And to truly grasp the genius architecture of matter, we have to try to wrap our minds around this kind of microscopic scale. Just consider the scale we're dealing with here. If you line up 1,000,000 atoms, it only equals the thickness of a single piece of paper. 1,000,000 of them. One speck of dust, that's about 3 trillion atoms. Or try this. If you took a regular apple and expanded it to the size of the entire Earth, its atoms would only be the size of regular apples. That is how miraculously tiny the ingredients of our reality truly are. And zooming in even further on the electrons, they don't even behave like neat little planets orbiting a sun. They exist as these weird fuzzy waves in a misty cloud, spinning on an axis at near the speed of light. Honestly, the sheer engineering required to maintain trillions of these hyper-fast charges for billions of years, it absolutely points to an incredibly complex, divine underlying design. But here is the massive revelation that changes literally everything. 99.99999%. That is the amount of vacuous, completely empty space inside a piece of solid iron. When you touch a heavy iron skillet, or, when two cars crashed into each other, the atoms aren't actually touching. The illusion of touching and solidity is simply invisible ethereal atomic charges repelling each other. No way, right? But it's true.
Theoretical physicist Brian Greene has this absolutely incredible analogy to cement this concept. He says, if you took the entire Empire State Building and you shrank it down to eliminate all the free, empty space between and within its atoms, the entire building would be the size of a single grain of rice. Let that sink in. Solidity, exactly as we know it and experience it every single day, is a complete illusion brought on by invisible, ethereal forces. And you know, this is exactly why Max Planck, who's widely considered the father of quantum mechanics, stated that all matter originates and exists by virtue of a force. He recognized that we must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. Matter isn't exactly this hard stuff we thought it was. It's simply localized energy. It's information from the mind of God performing an operation in our universe. Essentially, energy is spirit, information, doing something. All right, moving on to Section 4, Quantum Tunneling and Miracles.
Enter quantum tunneling. This is a proven quantum phenomenon where elementary particles literally dematerialize and rematerialize to pass straight through solid barriers. And this is a real game changer. Without it, two protons would never be able to bypass their repulsive fields to fuse together in the core of stars. It proves unequivocally that at the quantum level, particles can indeed move right through solid repulsive fields.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the experiment by Raymond Chow. He raced two photons of light, placing a solid barrier in the path of one and leaving an open path for the other. Astonishingly, the photon aimed right at the solid wall actually arrived on the other side faster than the one with the open path. How is that even possible? Because it didn't travel through the wall. It literally dematerialized on one side and rematerialized on the other, effectively traveling faster than the speed of light.
So under classical physics, if you walk into a solid wall, you're going to break your nose, for sure. But under quantum mechanics, particles bypass solid barriers seamlessly. Think back to that biblical paradox we talked about with Jesus and his disciples. This quantum dematerialization is perfectly in line with exactly how Jesus, in a physical body of flesh and bone, could materialize in front of his disciples behind locked, solid doors. It turns out matter and spirit aren't nearly as different as we historically assumed.
Let's bring this all home in Section 5, Rethinking Reality and Worship. Because matter and spirit are so deeply interconnected, and because God is simple, omnipresent spirit, he completely lacks a single locality. Basically, he isn't confined to a specific coordinate in physical space. And what this means for you, on a very personal level, is that worship is not confined to a building. Yes, going to a church building is great, but because God is spirit, you can worship him just as genuinely and effectively in your car, on your morning commute, or just walking out of nature. Worship is meant to be a lifestyle, no matter where you are.
When Jesus said in John 4:24 that God is spirit and his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth, he wasn't having some high-minded academic debate about metaphysics. He was talking to a culturally despised woman at a well. He was simply telling her that your closeness and your relationship to God matter infinitely more than your geographical location. God is everywhere, so you can connect with him everywhere.
So, we'll leave you with this. If the heavy, seemingly solid world around you is actually mostly empty space, held together by invisible, ethereal forces acting on a quantum level, what else about reality are you missing? Our physical universe is wrapped in this unseen fabric we are only just beginning to understand. So keep asking those questions, keep seeking the truth, and whatever you do, never lose your sense of awe.